Alright, so I'm redoing my video. The first one was fine, don't get me wrong. It's just that I feel like I could have done a lot more to make it interesting and concise. So first of all, I'm gonna explain what Programmer's Paradise is. Programmer's Paradise is a game where you play as a delivery man. And you drive to various businesses around the town, drop off packages and certain items they might need to keep running. At the start of the game, you are greeted with a title screen. It's very simple, but it gets the point across. And then upon entering the game, you receive messages from a guy. And he's telling you various things about the map and what you need to do your deliveries. And then eventually he'll start talking about other stuff the further you get into the game. So he's kind of like the guide of the game. And he'll give you a pickup point. And you have to go to that pickup point, you gotta load up all the items. Depending on where you go to pick up your items, you can get different items, and you have to take them to various drop-off points given to you by whatever dispatcher you're talking to, and a string that displays the destination and an arrow that points to your destination will be on your screen at all times, so you know where you need to go. And then, once you learn where certain things are, you don't need the arrow anymore because you can just use the string that tells you the destination. With each delivery and each shipment, you get money. You can use the money to buy gas, and the gas is what keeps your vehicle running. If you run out of gas while on a delivery, you become stranded and you reach the fail state of the game. When you're almost out of gas, you have an arrow appears, should be a orange flashing red arrow, and it points to where the gas station is, or the nearest gas station at least. So you have to have made enough money doing deliveries to refill your car with gas. And if you have any extra money at any point, there is a spray shop you can go to, which you can use to respray your car and try and get a color you like. It's completely random. However, it just gives you some incentive to keep making deliveries until you can customize your car in a way that you like, while also managing the gas. So upon completing the main campaign and getting all of the messages from the dispatcher teaching you how to do things, you will be prompted with another arrow that allows you to leave the town and get your score. Or you can continue making as many deliveries as you want to go for a high score. It's very arcadey. At first I was gonna have a save system, but I figured it'd be better to just go for an arcadey feel, because it's not a very long game, and you can play, and it's, the delivery and drop-off zones are often random. So you can, I would say it has replayability in the same way that an arcade game would. I think that's a fair synopsis of how the game works. So now, onto the technical side of things. It uses a map made up of tiles, which are stored within this folder here. I was wondering, what's the best way to do an open world in Clickteam? And obviously, I wanted to do it top-down because that's one of my favorite genres of driving games. But I still needed a way to do a convincing open world. So naturally, I settled upon using tiles made up of actives and backdrops that I could place on individual layers and create a map. Now, one thing you can see is that almost every single building in this game has the same sprite. There's a few exceptions to that, but there's two reasons for this being the case. First of all, that's the active object I used for collision. So even the buildings that don't have that appearance still use that object on the collision layer to make sure that the building has collision. It just has a backdrop on the above layer that gives it a different appearance. But there's a logical reason for having most of the buildings in the game have the same sprite. So as you know, this isn't isometric. This is 100% top-down 2D. So it's very, very easy to think that something is not a roof when it is, or when something is a roof when it isn't. And that was a problem I found myself having. I kept trying to add variety to the map when it came to the buildings, but my brain kept tricking itself into thinking that certain things could be driven on and certain things couldn't. So it was a matter of me constantly running into buildings because my brain kept telling me, hey, that looks like something I should be able to drive on. So I figured it'd be a lot simpler to just have a single coherent looking brick texture to serve as the roof of all of the buildings. So you can learn really fast that, hey, when you see this, it is the top of a building. You cannot go into it unless there's something specifying that you can, like a loading zone. The map made up of tiles has a couple layers to it. The bottom layer is this layer, it's the map layer. This is everything that can be driven on, but also not interacted with. It has the water, which just plays the repeating animation, and it has the roads, which are just backdrops and stuff. It's got grass, which are actives, it's got the flowers, all that sorts of good stuff like that. And the foreground layer is the layer that the truck is on. So this has all of the stuff that you can either interact with or collide with. So these grates on the ground, these make a noise when you walk over them. The bars make a metal noise, the grates make a wood noise, so it needs to check for collision. They are below the car on this layer, but they are still on the same layer. And then all of the things that you can collide with, such as the fencing, the walls, the little activator points, they're all on this layer so the car can collide with them. And then we have the above layer, which has all of the stuff that you can't collide with that should always appear above the vehicle. Like the backdrops that kind of add a little bit of variety to some of the buildings. The vertical grates, which are actually grates that you can go under. And the loading points and stuff. And then I forgot to mention on this layer we have these little bars on the roads, and they act as collision boxes. So if you're colliding with one of these boxes, code will activate if you're not steering to autocorrect your steering for you. And it makes driving a lot more fun when you drive on the roads. So obviously this is Clickteam. There's no skybox. So to add weather, you gotta use your brain. So what I did was, I created a sprite, an orange sprite, and then I overlaid it on top of the visible area, which is this 256 by 144 square here. And I gave it a transparency value and an effect. So the effect changes how the world looks depending on how opaque the time cycle sprite is and whatnot. It makes stuff look more blue when it's supposed to be night. It makes stuff look more bright when it's invisible, when it's supposed to be day. And I got a timer that counts up and counts down with each frame to determine how opaque it will be at any given point. This layer is the title screen layer. This just has the name of the game in the background running still, and then the press start, so you know to press start. This is the UI that has all of the UI elements, such as the warehouse destination, or just the destination string, how much gas you have left, how much cash you have, all of the arrows that can appear, the text and the radio string, all the stuff that's going to appear on your UI. Miscellaneous is where the scoring and various other things happens. You'll be given a score on how much cash you have left, how many deliveries you've made, and how many shipments you've made. And the debug layer is the debug layer, which obviously you don't see anything of. Also, this is a cut tree sprite I made. It's cut for a reason. So now on to the even more technical side of things. The menu screen. At the start of the game, when it first activates, it checks to make sure that you're not still pressing the start button. Because if you are, it would immediately start the game, and I don't want that. So I made it the way you first have to let go of start, and then press it again, to make sure that it can't just automatically go into it. So pause state 0, it does all of the stuff that, when it initializes, basically. Once you unpause, you can never go back to pause state 0. It's just start. It plays the menu music, it sets everything that needs to be invisible, visible, and whatnot, and it makes it where the truck constantly teleports back onto a highway to make the highway you're driving on look endless until you actually start the game. And then when you finally press start, it'll set your state to 1, which activates groups that need to be activated, and it makes stuff visible. And then if you do it again, it'll start state 2, which is the pause state, the regular pause state. So it'll stop your controls, it'll make things invisible, and then it'll slow your car down, because it doesn't just come to a complete stop, like it just slows your car down. Because I thought that looked cool. I wanted to make the menu and the game feel like they're part of the same thing. The collisions are a mess. I finally, right before, because in the deadline, I figured out how to do the collisions in a way that will not get you stuck. It won't get you stuck up against a wall. They're good. I think they're good. The way they turned out are very good, in my opinion. At least for the amount of knowledge I have on the subject. But yes, this is how I did the collisions. This is a mess. A total mess. But it works, so I'm honestly surprised. Here's the controls. This is from a cut shift mechanic. It just sets the shift value to something and it never sets it again. This is where you can switch the car on and off. It'll check for specific values, what you're pressing, if you have gas, if you've started, if the engine's on, and it'll turn it on and off accordingly. Easy peasy. You can take a look at MFA yourself, if you'd like. This right here is if you're not colliding with the front or the back of the truck, you can go forward to a certain point if you're under the shift value, which is constantly 3.6. And then if you're going backwards, it'll sub from the speed, and it'll make it negative, and then it'll do the translations depending on that. This is for if your engine turns off, or if you're not pressing forward and it's under, it's a negative value, so it's like it adds it up to 0. This subtracts it down to 0 if it's a positive value when you stop moving. And then this is just like a little check to make sure that it this one right here is just a little check to make sure that it sets to 0 once it gets to a really tiny number, because sometimes it doesn't like to set to 0, it starts setting to 5, E, O, 4, 5, I don't know what it's called. Okay, the steering wheel. This was pretty cool to do. So there's an alterable value, and if you hold left, it adds to that value. If you hold right, it subtracts from the value. And then 1 is the max it can be to the left, and then -1 is the max it can be to the right. And then if you let go of the steering wheel, it subtracts back down to 0 and sets it to 0. If you're going a positive value, if your speed's positive value, it'll set your direction to 1. If it's a negative value, it'll set your direction to -1. And if it's 0, it'll set your direction to 0. That's used for certain events. So if your truck direction is 1, it'll set truck correcting to 0, and it'll set your truck angle accordingly. If your truck direction is -1 and you're going above negative 0. Or under, no, yes, under negative 0.2 speed, it'll do the reversing. And then this right here is all of the conditions that it takes for truck correcting to be 1. So if you're not steering, truck steer is 0, your truck speed is over 2, and neither your neither your left or right turn is blocked, it'll set truck correcting to 1. And what that is an automatic angle correction when you're on the highway. So those gray bars on the highway I mentioned earlier, if you run into those, or you're colliding with those while you're driving on the highway and all those conditions are met, it'll auto-correct your steering so you'll be going straight on the highway. So the camera speed, the camera is always, or the display is always centered on a value that is equal to the truck speed plus an offset. So when you bump into a wall, it inverts your speed, so you bounce backwards. But that was a problem because the speed would always, it would jerk the camera back because the speed just reversed itself. So I added an offset that gets set every time you bump into a wall, and then it counts down from that offset to the actual speed. So now if you bump into a wall, it will not only revert your speed, but it will add to a cam offset value to make it where the camera doesn't immediately jerk back. Okay, now for text stuff. There are certain preset texts that can be found in this text bank here. This is where all the text is stored. So in this text bank, I have a text system that pulls from the text bank and shows the text on screen. So certain missions will trigger certain events will trigger which text to equal a certain thing. And it will set the progression to 1 so it can keep track of how many lines it's been through. It'll set the amount of lines to the amount of lines that it's supposed to show. And it'll set the text offset to where the text is in this bank right here. And then here's the actual text code. So basically, if the progression is under the number of lines and you're not paused, every 4 seconds, it'll add 1 to progression. And then this one right here, every 8 seconds, it'll add 1 to which text sound, which plays a sound for each text, every other text you receive. And this is the end, where if progression equals amount of lines, every 4 seconds, it'll say bye-bye, and then it'll set which text to 0. In which case, it'll set everything back to its default value. And if which text is over 1 and you're not paused, it'll make your text reappear. And then it'll always set the display to which text offset plus the progression. And each text has a scripted text function that, I don't know, flashes something on your screen, or makes it reappear, or invisible, or sets you onto a mission. In most cases, it just sets you onto a mission after a certain text. So while you're waiting for your mission to be given to you, you can turn your car off so you don't waste any gas. On to the missions. Oh yeah. So there's a bunch of items you can get here, and this always sets them to always be where your truck's at. So if you're on a mission, it sets can delivery fix, which was a last minute fix, which is just an alterable value that makes sure that 2 things aren't delivered at once if they're going to mess up anything. So when you put onto a mission, it sets your spawn point to a random number between 1 and 16. And then depending on what the spawn point equals, it'll set this block to a physical location on the map. And then if you have no items and the spawn point has been set and you're on a mission, it'll create the pickup point at where this spawner has been set. And it'll also set your destination, which is what appears on your UI to tell you where to go. So if you've picked it up at location 1 it has you can get these items. Like there's a random chance to pick up items, and then there's a guaranteed chance to pick up items at certain places depending on where you pick up the items. That remains true for all of the pickup points. And then this event down here destroys the pickup point. So if the value to create an item is set to 1, it will create the item at your truck, immediately set the position and rotation to match your truck. It'll add 1 to a value called items left, and it'll set the create value back to 0. And over here, it'll add the data to an array so it knows where that item needs to be dropped off. Down to here. And then it sets the value to where the first item you have needs to be dropped off. And it goes back up to here, and then it creates if there's no drop-offs and you have your items, it'll create the drop-off point at the spawn point here, which is set down there. If you can deliver, and you're overlapping the drop-off point, and the drop-off point equals the drop-off point for the item at that slot, which is set on items left, it'll destroy the item and give you some cash. It'll also sub 1 from items left and add 1 to deliveries complete. And then it destroys the drop-off point. And it does that over and over and over until you have no more items left. So when you have no more items left and you're on a mission and there's no pickup point, then boom, it adds a guaranteed $5 to the player cash. It adds 1 to missions complete. It resets the pickup and drop-off points. It sets everything to 0. And then if you complete each mission, it'll set you to a certain text, and then it'll set the spawn point back to 0. Until you beat the campaign, and then you get put onto this extra mission, which is just, which has a text that says, finding delivery drop-off. Be with you shortly, and then after a little bit, it'll put you onto a route, so you can keep playing as long as you want, even after you're done with the main campaign of missions. And then up here, it's just the visuals. Depending on how many items you have, it shows what arrows should be visible and when and where. Same goes for the winning arrow, which tells you where to go to win, get your score. The refueling arrow when you're out of gas, and the arrows that point to items. And the sound engine, if the engine's on, it'll play the idle song, or the idle track, like the engine running sound. If it's not, it won't play it. So if you're driving over the active grate, it'll play a wood sound on every interval depending on the truck speed. And the same goes for the metal grate, but it'll play a metal sound instead. And these are just the little talking sounds you can hear when someone's trying to talk to you. And here's the vehicle radio system, which is by far what I'm most proud of, because this is my area of expertise. Let me get a drink. At the start of the frame, it initializes all of the volumes to 0. They're 0 anyway, but it's just nice to have it neat. So channel 11 from 17 are dedicated to radio. And then it sets retuning to 0, the current station to 0, and all the radio tracks to 0, which are 0 anyway. It always sets the volume of channel 16 to radio DJ volume, the value, which is used later. So if you're not retuning and you're not paused and you press select, it'll play the retuning noise, it'll set retuning as to 1. And if retuning is 1, it'll stop channel 16, which is where the DJ lines are. Set retuning to 0, add 1 to current station, and set the text timer to 90. And if current station gets over 5, it'll set it back down to 0. So if you're not retuning and text timer is over 0, it'll start subtracting from text timer. So when you're retuning, it sets the alpha blending coefficient to the radio text to 0, so it's perfectly visible. And once the text timer has counted down, it'll start adding 15 to the alpha blending coefficient until it reaches its max level, so it slowly just fades out. So if the radio DJ volume is under 39 and it is playing, it'll add 2 to radio DJ volume. If it's over 0 and it's not playing, it'll subtract 2. So what that means is if you're listening to music and the radio DJ activates, it won't just be a sudden cut. The line will fade in and then fade out. Because the station volume is actually dependent upon the radio DJ volume. So if the DJ is talking, it will gradually lower the music. So if current station is 0, which means there's no station, it'll set the ambient sound to volume 6. But if it's 1, it'll set channel 11 to 40 minus the radio DJ volume times divided by 2, which makes it gradually fade in and out depending on whether there's a DJ talking. If you're on station 2, the same thing, but for channel 12. Station 3 is a bit different, because there is an AM sound that's playing constantly, and then there is the radio file that's playing constantly. And depending on how far you are away from a physical location on the map, depending on the distance from that item to you on the map, it will set the volume accordingly. So the closer you are to the quote-unquote broadcaster, you will hear more of the radio station track. It will be louder, and the AM will be very quiet. But if you go away from it, the AM static will become louder, and the radio part will become quiet. And the further you get away, the more that effect takes hold. And at a certain point, you can't even hear the station no more. It's just complete AM static if you're far away enough, which I thought was a really cool, novel thing to have for at least one radio station. Number 4, the same thing. It uses the same formula as station 1 and 2, except for it's a little louder because it's a talk radio, and there's no radio DJ, but it uses the same formula because why not? Channel 5 is another music station, and it uses the same formula on channel 15 as 1 and 2, but it's at the bottom of the dial because in lore it's hosted outside of the town you're in. So I figured it'd make sense to have it at the bottom of the dial. So if channel 11 is not playing, it adds 1 to channel radio track, and it plays a song accordingly, and then it'll fire a radio DJ event after a certain amount of time each track started playing. And at the end of the playlist, every 4 seconds, it'll set it to 1, so it'll reset the playlist. So if you're still listening to the radio station, when this event actually fires, it'll play a DJ line relating to the songs. Sometimes consecutive DJ lines too. And then these right here are completely random chance. If channel 16 is not playing already, and you're still listening to the radio, there's a random chance every so amount of seconds that a random DJ stinger will play. Completely unrelated to the song at hand. It's just like, yeah, you're listening to this FM. So it's that sort of thing. These are specific to the song. These are just random radio lines that could be at any point. So that's radio 1. Radio 2 does the same thing, except there's an additional check for these fires right here. So if one of these is playing, this can't play. On this radio, these are more important than these, so I had these take priority, so it can stop that one and play this one. But on this station down here, that's not the case. But it has the same formula, it's just on channel 12. Radio 3 is special because it's just 2 radio tracks that play in quick succession over and over again. There's no like radio DJ or anything like that, so it just adds 1, then it resets to 1, adds 1, resets to 1, and just plays over and over and over again. It's very novel though. So channel 14 plays radio 4, which is the talk radio. It's just 4 of these in quick succession. And radio 5, which is another music station, but a much less developed one than the rest of them. And it's on channel 15. And at the beginning of the frame, at the start of the frame, it sets the radio tracks of 1, 2, 4, and 5 to a random value. So when you start the game, you aren't always listening to the same song. It'll start the progression of each radio at a random point every time you start the game. And then here's the weather cycle I explained earlier that has a value that affects the transparency of the lighting, which affects the visual appearance of the sprites on the screen by using an effect. Petrol and shops. So if your engine is on, and you're not paused, and you have more than 0 petrol left, it'll constantly subtract 1 from how much you have left. And if you have 0, sets it to 0. You can't turn the engine back on. If you have under 1,000 cash, it'll display it as the full number. If you have over 1,000, it will display it as 1 point something K, etc, etc. So if you're at a petrol station and you're overlapping the collision box, it'll set an alterable value to A. If you aren't, it'll set that alterable value to 0. If the alterable value is 1 and you have 10 or more cash, it'll set the value to 0. And it'll subtract from your cash, and it will fill your tank and play a noise. If you have less than 10 cash, it'll play an error noise. And if you have over the amount of gas you can have, it simply just sets it to the max amount. And then that's it for the gas station. So the spray shop, at the start of the frame, it sets the default color of the car. It has the same formula to make sure you're not it's not running the same action. Like if you sit in the collision box, it has this right here to make sure that it doesn't just run over and over and over again. So if it sets is in marker value to 1. If you're in the marker, if you're out of the marker, it sets it to 0. So if you're in the marker and you have over 25 or more or equal to cash, it'll play the spray sound. It'll sub 25 from player cash, and it will destroy an item relating to the paint job, so it can recreate it if it needs to. And it'll set which color to a random value between 1 and 20. Once you go through the spray shop, it'll set the RGB coefficient to the preset color according to the value that it rolls. And if you get 20, it creates a botched spray job object. So if you get really unlucky, you'll get a completely random spray job. So it's just like a bunch of colors splotched all over your car and stuff. I thought that was really funny. And the fail state, if you run out of gas, after a certain amount of time, you'll get out of your car, and then the fail state will trigger, and you will get your score, but you will also get the bad ending. That's it.
Away, doggy.